us the intel about the next generation of Bulldogs. This is Before the Hedges, brought to you by Kroger.
Let's go, I'm a Bulldog.
Hello, DawgNation. Welcome in. I'm Kaylee Mansell with DawgNation recruiting insider Jeff Sentell. We've got some serious things to talk about today. I think the Open will reflect that. Four-star EDGE Khamari Brooks within the 2026 class has a fractured hip and is out for the rest of the season for North Oconee. But this is where having Jeff on the show is great because we can spin this in a positive way. He got some really good footage of Khamari Brooks on Saturday that shows that I don't think he's letting it get to him too much.
Yeah, so season cut short. Lots of big implications. Is North Oconee now the team to beat in Class 4A? He was an absolute dude, game wrecker on both sides of the ball. But, Kaylee, I wish everyone this special Before the Hedges blessing. If we fracture our hips, I hope we have that look on our face the day after when I see this guy walking around, big smile. Of course, he's in home in Athens, and that's a young man with a small fracture in his hip. His recovery time is about 3 months, which puts him right about in the window where he could be a bowl practice and at least go through the motions there with Georgia in December. Of course, if the Dogs keep winning and they extend the season into January, then obviously he'll be a factor in bowl practices. But you hate to see this because, listen, Kaylee, this guy knows how to close out a script. He won the state basketball championship as a sophomore. He won the state football championship as a junior. He won the state basketball championship again as a junior. And this is a season cut short when his last 3 seasons have ended in titles.
Now, covering high school football for the last couple of weeks, this has been a consistent theme with different players from across the state that are going to play at P4 schools, got hurt early on, are going to miss the season. But I think if you try to look at this from the glass half full perspective, this isn't going to dip too much into Khamari's time when he gets to the University of Georgia, which is different than some of the other injuries I've seen within high school football at the moment. So, it's a shame to see a kid at his peak go down and not be able to compete for a state championship run, which is absolutely in the cards for North Oconee. But I think he also understands that the next level is really important and that if his physical therapy goes well, then he'll be able to be with the team when everybody else from the class arrives as well.
Said it doesn't hurt. And the other thing is really, Kelly, again, he's the only edge for Georgia in this class. So he's the only young guy that's in this class that plays his position. So he's going to be motivated to get back. And it's one thing since he lives literally, I think, 6 stoplights away from Sanford Stadium. He's been at every game this season.
So at this point in the year for Before the Hedges, it's been a little bit different because 2026 classes have already been built. So each week we're really just getting into the specifics of each guy. But this show feels like it's probably being anticipated because there has been some news this week, news that you broke, and we'll get to that in a minute. So we do have a show that is filled with lots of news, new updates, and we're also going to hear from some really important guys as well. So this is what we've got going on today's episode of Before the Hedges. And it's not just what's going on with the running back position. I think everybody wants to know in a pretty straightforward manner with what's going on with the 2026 running back commit, Jae Lamar. There's new updates to this story, so we're going to break it all down as best as we can. Then also we've got a DawgNation conversation with Jayden Wade, who's the number 1 player in the class of 2028. We're also going to get to hear from one of his teammates who is currently committed to the University of Georgia and just his reaction to Jayden's interest in the program. So that's one that I'm really excited to get to. Then, of course, we've got our Mansell's Details, which highlights the viral plays within the class of 2026. And then we follow it up with the best performance of the week, and that's going to be our dog of the week. But I mean, we couldn't have started out this with any other story, and I think it's important to note that you did break the news that Jae Lamar was no longer with the Colquitt County program. We now have confirmation that he is back with the program as of this morning, but it was on social media everywhere after you released the article, and I think the big question that everybody wanted to know was why and what happened, and to do that, we are going to show you a clip. This comes from our friends at a station down in Albany. The reporter talked to Jae Lamar after the situation occurred, and this is what he had to say about why he was no longer with the team at the time.
Well, when I was at practice this week, Jay got a little rattled, and I heard him say, "I'm done, I'm quitting, I'm going to transfer." And when I saw him at the game tonight, I said, "Jay, what happened? Like, why didn't you play tonight?" And he was like, "You were at practice this week, you saw what happened." And he said, "The coaches said I was being disrespectful." I said, "Well, Jay, were you being disrespectful?" And he was like, I was being disrespectful. I take ownership for it. And I was like, "Well, what made you come to the game tonight?" He was like, "I would just feel even worse if I stayed at home." He said, "I had to come on and cheer on my guys." And he did that from the stands tonight.
Okay, so just truth be told, pretty straightforward here. Definitely some negatives looking at the story, but also some positives that can be taken away. Now, as of this morning, Jae Lamar is back with Colquitt County, but this presents the question, and I think the most important one is, does this change or affect how the University of Georgia sees this young man within their team?
Yeah, that's a great question, because eventually the conversation is going to happen, Kaylee, where Georgia's going to want to know what went down. What are we looking at here? Mm-hmm. Is this guy still a good fit for us? And I think that's, Kelly, I think that's maybe a to be determined situation, because, you know, the information we've been told is that Jae Lamar is still somehow with the team, working his way back to the team. I don't know what that looks like, Kaylee. I don't know if it means he's practicing or he's watching or he's serving some sort of internal thing there. You're not going to get a lot of those answers yet. And I don't know if it means he plays on Friday. But one of the things that I learned a long time ago in this business is everybody wonders about preferential treatment of athletes, especially really talented athletes. And in this case specifically, great Hall of Fame football coach in the state of Georgia, Rick Tomberlin, who coached Keo Spikes, who coached Terrence Edwards, who coached a lot of great football players coming through Washington County and other schools. He told me once, he's like, you know, if you take the kid away from football, how does his life get better? Like, his life only gets worse. Now, is it something that a kid can come back from or can't come back from? That's another serious stuff. That's something different. But, you know, one of the things I always think about in terms of, yeah, he's a great football player and he's really talented, but people just think, oh, of course the star player gets a chance to come back to the team. Well, what are we supposed to do? Like, are you supposed to like expunge him from football and then take away the one thing that's got a chance to really change his life, change the trajectory of his life? And I know opinions will vary, mileage will vary on that, but you know, the way you get Jae Lamar, great citizen, great person, the way you better his life and the life of those around him is you don't take away something from him that can really prosper for him in the future. Kaylee, it's a tough story because a lot of times I want to let readers read between the lines, because one of the questions is like, okay, so he's no longer on the team. What does that mean? Well, he didn't play in the biggest game of their year up to that point against unbeaten Valdosta. And at one point earlier this week, Coach Sean Calhoun at Colquitt County said he's just no longer with us right now. And when you hear things like that, I think it allows people to draw their own conclusions, because this is the best player on the team. This is one of the best 10 running backs in the country. Something had to have happened to jeopardize his good standing with the team.
Okay, this is a really good point, and I'm glad that you brought it up. This is an ongoing story, and it goes far beyond just the week's worth of content that we've had to talk about it. And because there is so little information about the situation out there, I do feel like a lot of it's going to be he said, she said. People are going to have to draw conclusions on their own. But if you could say one thing about maybe one piece of this story that you don't want to get misconstrued, or you don't want people to have to draw their own conclusions on, what part of that narrative is this for you?
I think, you know, the whole status is he on the team? Is he off the team? I think that's very fluid, Kaylee. And I hate that word, but like, who's to say that, you know, Jay's a model citizen going forward, and there's no, things that were disrespectful, as the reporter there from WAOB TV in Albany clearly stated. Maybe this is a change agent in his life. Maybe this is something where he realizes how close he came to losing something. Or if this happens, if it goes the opposite direction, well, then obviously that's going to be more data in the decision about, you know, how Georgia looks at him in the future, Kaylee, because we've talked about this a lot. He's really talented. I was one of the guys that really knew that story intimately about how he didn't play freshman and sophomore year because he was a troubled kid. And then it seemed like he changed his life last year when he bursts out on the scene, shows SEC talent. I think he had like 8 touchdowns in his first 6 games. And now you're at a point where I think Jay's at a crossroads in terms of, what happens from here, because I think really this story is not what happened and then how he got back on the team. It's how he does moving forward that will decide a lot of things. It will decide his college football future. It will decide how well he plays in the SEC. And it will also decide whether or not ultimately he's a Georgia Bulldog, because some of the events of the past 2 weeks have, in some ways, lessen his chances of that great future in Athens.
So now clearly Jae Lamar specifically is in a very unique position for this class, because the other position groups in which there are players where it feels like it could be a toss-up if they end up with the team, there are other players within that position group, so that if you were to lose those guys, it doesn't feel catastrophic because there are other guys within that room. However, Jae Lamar is the only running back commit in the 2026 class. Georgia only signed one other running back in the 2025 class. Yes, the transfer portal is always an option, but when it comes to 2026, most teams have already built their class, have finished their class. So does Georgia need to start preparing to take another running back in this room just in case, or is there even anybody else out there in which Georgia can give some attention or recognition to try and have an alternative option? I
feel like Kaylee, Georgia was already looking for a second back in this class prior to these events. How we know this is, they hosted the state rushing leader right now, and that's Ty Cummings out of West Lawrence. He's made so many headlines, Kaylee. Now he's 5'7.5". He's about 180 pounds, maybe 178. Georgia made sure and measured him this past weekend when he was in Athens for the Kentucky game. I'm sure they were looking over that scale saying 185. But the young man, I don't know how you do this, Kaylee. I talked to him about it. He had 19 carries for 617 yards. That's 32 yards per carry and 5 touchdowns.
That's got to be a GHSA record, right?
Yeah, single game record, obviously. And he ran for like 1,000 his freshman year. He had 1,700 his junior year. So like he's stacking up a lot of numbers, and he's already at like 1,400, 1,500 yards right now. And Kaylee, it's not one thing that the young man had 615, but he also had a game with 224, 168, 221, and he's committed to Georgia Southern, and Georgia's taking a look. Now, Kaylee, years of doing this is where my experience is going to tell me that Georgia doesn't take a lot of 178-pound tailbacks, but do you use him as a gadget player? Do you use him more as a kind of the things you're seeing now with Cash Jones, or maybe what you see out on the slot with Zachariah Branch, and maybe some of those early James Cook touches of what the looks he got on the corners in terms of his early years in Athens? I think all that stuff's in play, but it also comes back to another name, Amari Latimer, who's currently committed to Wisconsin. He's at Sandy Creek, and this guy, there's no issues about his size whatsoever. He's about 6'1" and 220. He looks ready to play on Saturday in the SEC. So I think it magnifies that, Georgia, Kirby Smart, this staff always likes to be very prepared. If things do go sideways with Jae Lamar and his future in Athens, then they need to be able to have some other options. And they also even brought in a young man from Thomas County Central, currently committed to Wake Forest. He was in Athens on Saturday as well for the Kentucky game. Another undersized, really speedy back, the guy that can make a lot of guys miss in space. So I hate to couch this as a soap opera, but running back recruiting, Kaylee, has gotten very dramatic over the last couple of years. It used to be in the days of Del McGee, Georgia would have their top 4 guys, and they'd have their choice of maybe 2 of the top 4, and they'd end up with a bunch of stars. Of course, NIL makes that so much difficult now with guys like Savion Hyder commanding so much money and how much more pricey that is. Even with David Daniel Georges, the number 1 running back in 2027, looks like it's already going to be a Tennessee and Ohio State bidding war there, where the Georgia's guy looks very good as well. So running back has gotten a lot harder, and it's harder at a place like Georgia. And then this latest stuff with Jae Lamar, and is Georgia going to take 2 backs? Is Georgia what are they going to do there? What do the plan Bs and plan Cs look like? It's probably turning out to be the most kind of I would say difficult position in the 2026 recruiting class.
There is no scientific research to back this up, but it would not surprise me if there is a direct correlation between running back recruiting and the amount of gray hairs I've gotten on my head since I've started doing this role with Jeff over the last year. So I think that soap opera is definitely the best way to describe it. But he did mention some of the other options that Georgia has at the running back position, and those will come up in our top targets that we'll have towards the end of the show. So stick around for that. Also, we're going to have, I guess you could call it a double DawgNation conversation here in just a moment. We'll hear for 2 IMG guys. But first, we want to remind you that here on Before the Hedges, we are brought to you by Kroger. And I used my Kroger Boost membership this week. Anytime that the temperature gets below a certain amount, my brain just emphasizes that I need soup, but I didn't have all the tools that I needed to make some of my famous soups that I had. So I did use my Kroger Boost membership this week to have those delivered directly to my house. Makes it so convenient, so easy, and allows me to maximize what little time I feel like I have during football season, and that way I can still make my favorite meals. So many benefits to Kroger Boost, not even just the grocery delivery, the fuel points as well. And if this isn't something that you do, I could not recommend it more. So to find out more, go to Kroger.com/boost. Again, that's Kroger.com/boost. All right, so we've got a DawgNation conversation. I love this one. It's definitely light, definitely fun, because everybody loves a quarterback. And Georgia's got the number 1 quarterback commit in their 2026 class. That's Jared Curtis. Now, knowing that information, Georgia's probably not going to put their time, money, and attention towards somebody in the 2027 class. So that leads us to 2028. Number 1 quarterback in 2028, it's the 5-star Jayden Wade, who just recently took a visit to Georgia. I imagine that he's going to be our way too early number 1 target in the class of 2028.
Kaylee, he was already rated number 1, but I went and saw him recently against a pretty good team, Central Phoenix in Alabama, which is normally pound for pound one of the best 8 to 10 teams in Alabama. And he just wrecked them, Kaylee. He had 5 total touchdowns. He was 11 out of 11 for 350 yards. 4 touchdown passes and 1 47-yard improvisational, you're not going to catch me, Mike Vick-esque type run. So, Kelly, I think that's pretty good. When you can go 11 out of 11 for 350, that's something like 30 yards per attempt. Mm-hmm. That's pretty strong. 100% completion rate. And he was one of those guys where you already knew he was highly rated, but you see how well he plays the game, it really jumps out at you.
Well, I think that one thing that just a conclusion that we can draw from this is 2028, that makes him a sophomore, and he's been starting games for IMG since his freshman year. We know the talent that IMG produces, and the fact that they trust a young guy like this to lead their team early on, I think that tells you everything you need to know about Jayden Wade. Before we hear from him, I kind of want to hear from you. What is it about his skill set that put him in that number 1 position? What makes him different from the other Georgia quarterback commits that we've seen before?
First of all, he's about 6'3 and a half, prototype size. 190, probably 200 already. Big arm. But not only that, this is what you like to hear, because IMG Academy is, I think last year's quarterback was on his way to SMU. Maybe the year before that, maybe they had a Texas Christian TCU type guy. But Jayden got to IMG as an 8th grader and watched and waited and learned how to play the game. He got up on the board. And he said that was good for him. He said he hated it watching, but he said that was good for him, and that's things he needed to know. And, the other thing, we have a couple of conversations here, but I want the viewer to come across with this is there's something about this kid between the ears that is really special. One of the things that I can share is that when he got to Georgia this summer for a visit, he got the VIP white glove service type treatment. But it was like they got Jayden Wade on the board, and like Coach Bobo, the quarterback coaches, the offensive staff were like, what's that famous Kirby gif where he's eating popcorn at Justin Fields' his game, and he goes, sort of like that. They were kind of blown away by the football IQ and how well he already knows ball to be a sophomore who hasn't started yet at IMG Academy until this year.
So you had the chance to catch up with Jayden Wade the day before he took his visit to Georgia and Alabama. So this is how Jayden felt going into that visit. This is a Before the Hedges DawgNation conversation.
Jayden, correct me if I'm wrong. You've been here 2 years and waited
I got here my 8th grade.
eighth grade year. This is finally your 3rd year, huh?
Yes, sir.
What has that taught you?
It just taught me a lot of matureness and as a quarterback. I learned a lot from being a quarterback. I'm glad I sat those years, but I'm glad I sat those years. But at the moment, I wasn't too happy about it. But during that process, I learned defenses. I learned the techniques, the fundamentals about quarterbacks. So I'm just glad I got this opportunity to play, and I give all thanks to God.
Kind of might mirror your college experience, man. You go to a big program, you might have to wait a little bit, right?
Yes,
I want to ask you. Obviously, I think you're going to.
Oh, chill.
I think you're going to Georgia tomorrow, right?
Yes, sir.
What's that program like, man? How do you feel about Georgia right now?
I love Georgia. It's a real. They on the same page, keep the main thing type of school, and they all on the same mindset, and they all want to get the win at the end of the game. So yeah.
How do you feel about the way you're recruiting you? What they're recruiting you? What do you like best about Georgia right now?
I just love that they. I try to keep in contact with them. They always letting me know what I need to do better at, what I need to strive for, and they just are good. They come to me as family. It's like a home to me.
How does Georgia fit what you're looking for?
Georgia fits a lot. It fits everything that I'm looking for, but I'm still looking for other colleges to go to, and I still have my options open.
What motivates you?
What motivates me is my mom. It's what I do it for. That's my why. I want to get her out with the situation we used to be in. I'm from South Central, and it's not a great neighborhood to go. If the people that's from there, they know. I grew up in South Central, so I want to change that, and I'll pay my mom bills off.
Nate Frazier grew up in Compton, in Georgia.
Yeah,
so
I know Nate. Yeah, I went to school with him.
Are any of the Georgia guys on you already? Is Zach on you? Is Preston on you? Are they talking to you yet?
Zach and Preston for sure on me. Ellis on me too.
Ellis
Robinson, yeah.
Why? What's he saying?
He's just telling me commit to the G. But yeah.
Who do you think's recruiting you hard? Put it that way.
I think Ohio State recruiting me hard. Florida, Georgia, Auburn, all those top colleges.
This probably is your best game as the starter at IMG, right? 3 touchdowns.
Sir.
What was different about tonight? They kind of let you loose a little bit.
It was just the adversity. I came in with a killer mindset. I told all the guys, I'm going to ride with y'all. I told my head coach we're going to win this game. We came out with that dub.
All right, so in a minute, we're going to hear from one of his teammates that's also committed to the University of Georgia. Now, I do think that one of the things that I took away from this is there's so much value in a guy that understands the waiting game, because I feel like now in this NIL age, young quarterbacks are more eager for the opportunity to come in and start, and if they don't, then they look at the portal as this big, shiny opportunity. But as someone who has had to have that waiting game at IMG and understands that sometimes the best thing that you can do for yourself is learn, that's a trait in someone that can't be taught, and that I think, especially now in today's era of college football, that's a really big deal.
I think, what can you look at, Kaylee? Lots of people have had to wait. Arch Manning has ballyhooed and hyped as anybody ever had to wait. And, he's got that great perspective. But, okay, let me tell you something what I really like about that interview. And I'm going to give away a little secret here, okay? I love it when I talk to a quarterback that has a lot of shine on him, and his teammates are giving him and acting a fool while he's trying to do the interview. And especially the 5-star senior offensive linemen that are just being silly, because that means they love the kid. Mm-hmm. That means that he's immersed in the culture. They want to play for him. They want to fight for him. And I think if you go back and look at that film, he's literally giggling because everybody's like, Jayden Wade, I want your autographs and stuff like that. To me, there's something that is timeless there. That, when somebody gets to talk to the media or there's a microphone in front of his face, his teammates are going to be boys and act silly and try to make him laugh and giggle through it all. Kaylee, that is a time-honored scouting tool that I use to determine whether or not the guy has the pulse of his team.
So speaking of his teammates, one of his teammates, the 4-star safety, Zach Fork, currently committed to the University of Georgia. Jeff had the opportunity to ask Zach on what he thinks about the interest between Jayden and the University of Georgia. So this is Zach Fork.
I'm saying you're the best quarterback in the class of 2028. I'm trying to recruit him to be a Georgia Bulldog. That's all I got to say. He's the truth, though.
He's a what? He's
the truth. He's the truth.
He told me Preston's talking to him. He said Ellis is talking to him. Everybody's talking to him already.
Yeah, when you got a guy like Jayden Wade, you want him to be your teammate, when you go to the next level. Because we know where he's capable of, and I see the work he puts in every day and how he prepares, and you don't really get that type of preparation coming into a game like this anywhere. So I'll definitely say that's the main reason why I wanted to come join the Dawgs.
If he wound up at Georgia, how happy would you be?
On a scale through 1 to 10, 11.
11.
That's my guy. We both from California, so I've known him pretty much over half his life. So, yeah, that's my guy. Just having him part of that culture would be amazing.
Is he wheels or arm? How would you break down his game? How good of a player is he? What are his strengths?
His strengths is from top down. It's from his head, his cerebral, his football IQ, to his arms, and then to his legs. So he could do it all. Like, he doesn't have any weaknesses as a quarterback, and that's special.
I don't know if I've ever heard anybody at that age use the word cerebral. So that may have been the most impressive part of that entire interview to me.
So there's a lot of stuff going on there. Number one, IMG just beat the brakes off Central Phoenix, right? And so the band, in their sound and fury signifying nothing, they just played for like 10 minutes after the game, kind of ruined their like post-game selfies and everything else like that. And then you got to appreciate a guy that's got a microphone in his hand, but is still committed to the bit where he's going to point at his head and say it starts from the top down, and then it goes to his arm, and then it goes down to his legs. Of course, Zach Ford, great friend of the show. That's the guy that's going to be a future captain, I believe, at Georgia. He's been a captain for the last 3-4 years at IMG Academy. Very rare thing to do. And did you listen to him really closely, Kaylee? Because he's known him over half his life. Mm-hmm. And they grew up in the same area together. Nate Frazier, they know him as well. So you want a program like Georgia. Now listen, guys, it's going to get costly. It's going to get expensive. Ohio State's going to be involved. Texas is going to be involved. Everybody's going to be involved. But you want to have roots down in a recruitment. And I think Georgia has roots down. When he was at Georgia for the Saturday, right, for Alabama, Georgia brought him out there amongst all the other commitments and let him watch the extended pregame as apart from the regular mainstream commitments. He got treated like a commitment. He got to go through the locker room. He got to watch the cornerbacks warm up. He got to talk to A.J. Green, who was on the sideline. And A.J. Green was like, dude, man, you're a sophomore? So he had his cheese-in moment with everything else like that. So, Kaylee, Georgia's going to put the weight belt on. They're going to roll the sleeves up, and they're really going to try for Jayden Wade, and I think they definitely should.
And even though this is really early on in the process, everybody knows how important the quarterback position is, so this is one that we're going to have to follow along. But quarterback recruiting is definitely expedited, so we'll have more updates on this as we know ourselves. And then we'll actually have more with Zach Fort here in just a minute when we do Mansell's details. But Georgia and Georgia Tech. It is coming very soon. It'll be here before we know it. It's on a Friday just like last year. And this game is in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which when we think about Mercedes-Benz Stadium, typically has that home atmosphere to it when we see SEC championships or opening kickoff games. This one's definitely going to have more Tech fans at it, but just to ensure that there are more Dawg fans than Tech fans, we encourage you to buy tickets to the game. You can do it through mercedes-benzstadium.com/events to purchase those tickets. I mean, it feels like this is the two best versions of these teams that we've seen play each other in a while, and that game's going to have some real stakes to it at this point in time. So hope to see you all there, DawgNation, for what they're calling the Invesco Triple Q Atlanta Gridiron Classic, but also we know it as Clean Old Fashioned Hate, and we hope to see you there. Isn't that right, Jeff?
I think Tech is going to pocket about $10 million from this game, so that'll help them buy a couple players at least. Kaylee, you're at least a wagering young lady who will estimate on sports prop bets and the like. Do you think that game will be 75-25 Dawg fans, or do you think it'll be 70-30, 60-40 there?
I would say more in the 70-30, 65-35 range, because since this game is in Atlanta, like I feel like I know a lot of people that don't even really like Georgia Tech, but they just don't like Georgia, so they'll say they're rooting for Tech and they're going to show up with their friends to cheer against Georgia. So I wouldn't say that there are going to be 30% true Georgia Tech fans in that building, but some that have been willing to jump on the bandwagon just because they don't like the University of Georgia. Does that feel right?
Got a follow-up for you too. Well, because you think Tech only sells out like 50,000. So they don't have a whole lot. And we know from history when Georgia goes and plays on Bobby Dodd that at least, 60, 70% of Bobby Dodd turns out to be Georgia fans as well, or at least 50-50. Here's a better question. Do you think Tech will be undefeated in that game, heading into that game? Because that would be the biggest Georgia Tech game ever, would it not?
No, I don't think they're going to be undefeated going in that game.
You don't
I
think
think
so?
they'll have one loss.
One loss.
I think it's going to be to Syracuse.
Ooh.
Anyway,
Kaylee
they
dropped.
might have the better record than Georgia coming into that game, but I don't think that they're going to be undefeated. Okay, so that's enough of that. It's not that far away. We hope you buy your tickets. We hope you see there. I love that it's a Mercedes-Benz Stadium, but we've got something more important right now. We got to talk about Mansell's details. All right, big 2026 performances this week. We'll start with a tight end who we talked a little bit about last week. This is Lincoln Keys. Keeps coming up in our details. Super impressive. We'll show you the highlight on the screen here. We've seen him make multiple touchdown catches at this point. He gets that one over the defender. Definitely a 50-50 ball, but he comes out away with the touchdown.
Big target. He goes and basically goes to the post. One of the things you can see with Lincoln is catch radius. He's a little bit faster than most might think, especially in the 6'6", 240-pound range right there. He says his forte is a blocker, but he can definitely go and get it.
Now, he does have the height advantage, but also, too, that's just not an easy catch to make. But Lincoln Keys finishes out the night, caught 5 passes for 91 yards, and then you see here the touchdown and a 42-14 win. So now we'll move on to a defensive player. We've got multiple things to show you from the defensive end, Carter Lucky. He's playing for a new coach this year at Norcross. He's been an absolute force for this team. I know that coach came into a good situation just having a veteran defensive end there, but Carter Lucky, someone that can do it all. I fear that that's somebody in 2026 we're not talking enough about.
Yeah, Georgia legacy, of course. He's going to be an interior guy at Georgia, going to be a 3 or a 5, but you see him playing more of a traditional defensive end for the Blue Devils right there. And this is, Kaylee, this was his most productive game of the year. I know you have the numbers, but he created a lot of havoc in this game.
Yeah, finishes the night out with 8 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, and also 1 sack and a 22-16 win over Parkview, which Norcross absolutely needed to win. They get it done thanks to the efforts of Carter Lucky. We're going to continue with some other defensive highlights. This comes from the senior linebacker, Nick Abrams, who I think that we said last week, just full force every single play. I mean, oh my gosh, he had to have knocked the breath out of that guy, right?
I think with Khamari now shelved, this guy becomes the leading candidate on the defensive side of the ball because, Kelly, we're saying his name over and over. We're seeing now where he's getting in the backfield. Early in the year, it was more run defense or pass coverage. He's got 2 pick sixes on the year so far.
Yeah, and we've got another clip to show you as well from Nick Abrams. I still can't get over how big that hit was. This is honestly the more impressive one out of me just because look what he has to do right there. Knocking off 2 defenders and the quarterback falls over. I mean, honestly, he was probably just terrified of seeing Nick Abrams come his way at that point, right?
So let's pop the hood on this and go look at it. So remember when he was telling us about talking to Nick to Roquan Smith earlier this year, and he was getting some advice from Roquan Smith, and Roquan Smith told him, use your hands more, and the big thing was block destruction, Kaylee. And you see right there, taking on a block, knifing his way into the backfield. That is what you want to do in terms of block destruction, in terms of getting through the guy in your way between you and the football.
And he definitely would have gotten to the guy if he didn't fall down. Nick Abrams finishes the night, 9 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, as well as a forced fumble. We told you Zach Fort would come back up into the conversation, and he had another terrific night. You see the first one here. It's going to be the forced fumble, which we saw C.J. Allen finally do that for Georgia the other day. And so when I was watching this, definitely gave me shades of C.J. Allen.
You see him again take on the block. He's right there up in the box as a run defender in the box. And not only does he get the guy on the ground, he forces a turnover for his teammate to go get it.
All right, and then we've got one more play to show you from Zach Fort here. I think the blitz is one of the most fun plays to watch a defense do, whether it's at the collegiate level or the high school football level, and Zach Fort just executes it so well there on the corner coming in for the blitz.
Gets the sack, Kaylee, and I'm going to manifest this and speak this into the world right now. Do you remember that Eric Stokes play where he jackhammered the Tennessee quarterback in Neyland? Zach Fort is built for plays like that, and he will make plays like that as a blitzing safety, a blitzing DB for the Georgia Bulldogs.
And he's one of the guys on this team that, because of the level of competition that he plays against and also with, the stats don't always jump off the page for Zach Fort, but the impact is there. So he finished the night with just 2 tackles, 1 tackle for loss, and 1 sack. But, I mean, that's one of those programs where everybody kind of gets their bag in, too. So that's Zach Fort. We've got one more highlight to show you. This comes from Justice Fitzpatrick, which, by the way, he's been out with an injury, comes back for this game, makes his presence known, pick 6 for Justice Fitzpatrick.
First game back, missed the first half of the season, Kaylee. And what do you do in your first game back wearing that number 2? Also recently visited Georgia for the Alabama game. You make a play. One of the things Kirby Smart always says is, how do you make your living, or how do you really get your stats up as a DB? You look out for tips and overthrows. And look at him. He'll say, thank you very much. And he'll go in the end zone and said, been too long since I kissed that pay dirt, but we're here now.
All right, so that's going to wrap up our details for right now. I do want to quickly mention that I get the chance to see Keelan Jones this Friday. I'm really excited for that.
Wow. You got a game with Keelan Jones, going to play both ways, going to run the ball.
Yes, and same with, I know Jordan Edmonds is not a Georgia commit, but it's cool anytime you get to see a 5-star defensive player who plays both sides of the ball. So very much looking forward to seeing both of those guys, not just at the positions that they're going to play at the collegiate level, but also getting to see the best of the best play both sides of the ball. That's always very exciting. So I wanted to mention that before we got to our Dawg of the Week.
I'm a big dog, no leash, you all bark, no teeth. That's a whole lot of wins on me. That's a whole lot of wins on me.
Special teams for the win 2 weeks in a row. Dawg of the Week. Harran Zureikat, the 3-star kicker out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, had a school record 57-yard field goal, 5 punts for 200 yards with a long of 59, 3 touchbacks as a kickoff specialist. He is ranked the #1 kicker in the 2026 class by Cole's Kicking, and then you can see the 57-yarder here. I know that we are living in an age where kickers are just better in general, and the average kick in which they can make it is a little bit further. But no player at the high school level should be able to do this. And he could have gone probably 5 yards back and still made that.
Yeah, I think every kicker these days has a bionic leg, Kaylee. And, sometimes you wonder about what they're feeding these kids, or are they putting too much juice, or they putting nitrogen in those balls for kickers. I want you to walk you through this film for a second. You're right. I think that probably would have been good from where it crossed the post. I think it probably would have been good from 60, 63, 64. I want you look at this back end. Did you see that low 5?
Look at the player on the other team.
That's what I want. That's what I want the Before the Hedges crew to watch, because, tell you what, you can have all these guys, 300-pounders, run 4.5s, bench press a mountain, bench press a Toyota Prius, but when you see a kicker kicking the ball 57, people are like, I've never seen this before. And look at number 6, low key. He's like, I'm not going to make a big deal of it, but man, that was a heck of a kick. Come and give me some of that low 5 action right here. You love that. Now, Kaylee, here's some more backstory about this. First of all, his Fox Creek team has not been doing well. They lost last week 63-3. So much so that, I try to follow all the headlines with all these players. So much so that the last week, it was such a lopsided game that the athletic director made some public comments about how his team was kind of outmatched, even mentioned something, I believe, to the effect there was reports that maybe they needed to play the junior varsities of some of these kids, some of these teams on Friday night. First of all, that's not a very good look for anybody that's playing football to say we need to play your varsity. Our varsity needs to play your junior varsity. But it's been an up and down year. And again, they lose that game 21-10, but the young man booms a 57-yarder. Kayla, I don't know how you feel. This is a very radical opinion, but I think when anybody makes a kick in high school over 55 yards, you should probably give him 4 points, not just 3 points. But this guy, #1 kicker in the country, he's in the Pittsburgh area, not having a great year, but he is kicking the stew out of that ball.
And he's got so much time till he gets to Georgia, too, whenever he goes through their strength and conditioning. Yeah. Like, imagine at that point what he's going to be able to kick. So I don't care even really what level you're at. That is such an impressive thing to accomplish, especially at the high school level. So very deserving Dawg of the Week.
I know we're going to
No
get.
question about it.
I totally agree with you, 10 tones down. But like,
Yeah.
we're going to hear from people that are like, all right, before the hedges, enough with the kickers and the punters and the specialists. You know, it's very simple. Look at all those highlights. You had some great games. Carter Lucky had a great game. I think Craig Dandridge had a great game. He now has 11 touchdowns on the year. But when you see a kicker in high school football kick 57 yards, that is a dog of the week performance.
And there will be no special team slander here
Oh
on
my
Before
gosh.
the Hedges. So Jeff can say what he wants. I'll say what I want. Not taking that, especially when it's that.
Then watch it now. When Kaylee breaks out the finger, you see that? She's in training. That is a discipline. Don't mess with me finger.
Mm-hmm.
So you mean business with that one.
Yeah, I do. All right. I'm so excited that this week Jeff will be joining me on my DawgNation Game Day show. Going to take place at Auburn anytime we're on the road. That means I get my good friend Jeff. Starts 2 hours before kickoff, so it's going to be at 5:30. We're going to hear from a lot of people on the DawgNation staff, but it's always better anytime I have Jeff Sentell by my side. So I hope that you'll join us for DawgNation Game Day at 5:30, as well as for the post-game show that Brandon will do immediately after the game. And then to make sure you get notified anytime we go live, specifically for DawgNation Game Day, then make sure to subscribe to our DawgNation YouTube page, but also hit that little bell next to it. That way you can get notified when we go live. It's going to be a really good show. I'm excited to have Jeff, and I hope that you'll be a part of it with us.
Kelly, you know you can confuse an Auburn fan more so than the Tiger and War Eagle stuff.
No, go ahead.
You
I'm
ask
gonna say
them
anything sassy.
about, do they prefer plain or plains? Because that is a bone of contention among the Auburn people, because there's a poem that they call Jordan Hare and Auburn's campus. There's a line in the poem. It's called The Loveliest Village on the Plain, but everybody likes to call it the Plains. So you can really confuse people at a tailgate. Trust me, I'm aware of this because I lived in Alabama for 8 years due to my career trajectory and my career opportunities there. But you can really confuse an Auburn fan by asking them about the loveliest village on the plain, and is it plains or plain?
I thought it was going to have something to do with the double mascot, but that makes sense too. All right, we're going to do our class breakdown. We'll start with the offensive side of the ball. This is just a reminder of who the commitments are within the class. It starts with the offense. Jae Lamar currently still remains on there. I mean, at any point in time, is this bound to change? Jay is the only one on there who doesn't have the lock. So what's more likely to happen for the offense? Georgia adds another name, or they lose a name out of this group?
It's more likely they add a name. I was just kind of laughing, trying to suppress a laugh there, Kaylee. Maybe we should put that thinking emoji. You know, we got the lock emoji next to all those other guys. Maybe we should have a up in the air. Well, we'll see on that one. I think Georgia will eventually realize, probably with numbers and everything else, we do expect some attrition on this commitment board and a couple of guys. I think they will steer some of their efforts towards another running back.
All right, so now let's move on to the defensive side of the ball. We did touch on Khamari Brooks, but there's also somebody that I wanted to get an injury update on for this class, and that's the 4-star defensive lineman, Anthony Lunnan Jr.
Yeah, Anthony AJ, the Georgia legacy, has a torn meniscus, and he was told it is a 4-month recovery. So his senior year is also cut short. I mean, not having the best of year this year, the Clark Central Gladiators are compared to the North Oconee Titans. But that's another Georgia Bulldog that's on the shelf with a season cut short right there. And, you know, Kayla, like you said, you get to go to speaking of lovely villages, you're going to be in Woodstock this weekend.
I am. I
on
do
Friday.
love Woodstock.
And you're going to get to see Keelan Jones, another Georgia legacy. His mother went to Georgia as well. Another tidbit here, Jordan Smith, the defensive back out of Houston County. He had a 90-yard kickoff return, Kaylee, this past weekend. The second time he's done that this year. I just wonder, do folks not have internet? Do they know they don't need to kick that thing to Jordan Smith?
Would he do that for Georgia?
No, Georgia's got a lot of guys that can do that. I think one of the things I was talking to the Houston County coach, Jeremy Edwards, is he said Coach Smart checked in recently, and he was looking at some of the film from Jordan Smith, and he's like, man, we could use him right now. Georgia needs to tidy up that other safety spot. If they can get another guy that can play like KJ Bolden in his freshman year, he'll take it right now.
All right, so we'll just do, we special teams. I mean, so much airtime for Harran Zureikat and Wade registers. So if that's not something that you want, we'll move on. But you should watch the last 2 weeks to know all about these guys. Then we've got our class snapshot. No changes to this. The most important thing on here is the fact that Georgia still ranks number 2 for the class of 2026 from a national perspective. Let's do our top targets because we did have a name come off the list, and I thought it was important to talk about him. So the number 1 last week, it was the 3-star offensive tackle, Jared J. Dowdy. He did commit to Alabama, so he is off the list. But we mentioned earlier, too, some of the other running back options. Jeff mentioned Amari Latimer, who's committed to Wisconsin. Also, is there any update on Will Rejecki, who's committed to Memphis?
Currently hurt. He has 999 yards rushing, but he didn't play last week for Sequoia. One of the things, the names we brought up earlier in the show, a guy that's kind of the flavor of the week right now for Georgia fans in terms of running backs is Ty Cummings. He did not leave Georgia with an offer, so they're going to evaluate. They're going to keep looking. Ty told me this week that Coach Crawford was going to watch him on his tape for tough yards on the in-between tackles, short yardage play. He wants to know how tough of a how much he fights for the tough yardage besides breakaway run after breakaway run. A lot of things too, Kaylee, a lot of his stats, which are impressive, they've came as a Wildcat quarterback and not as a true running back. So that's one of the things that makes it a little bit distinctive of an evaluation there. But one of those things, flipping at the top targets, last week, Kaylee, we did say that don't expect Jared J. Dowdy in this class because Mom had classified herself as an Alabama super fan. And as we know, one of the truisms in recruiting is like follow the visits, but also what Mom wants. Mm-hmm. If Mom is a super fan of one school, that's going to make it really hard for someone to commit elsewhere. Tyler Chukiam, it seems like he's in love with Florida right now because Florida is winning a lot. He was down at Florida recently. He still hasn't taken a visit to Georgia. I think we'll know if we don't see Tyler on an official visit to Georgia for the Ole Miss or the Texas games. That's not going to happen right now. And again, I think Georgia be very interesting to see how much they ramp up communications with Amari Latimer. Because I'll be honest, Kaylee, if I had to say one guy on this that I think may end up at Georgia, probably the most likely is Latimer. But that right there is even an outside shot as well. For the most part, this class is mostly intact.
All right, so that's going to wrap up today's episode of Before the Hedges. DawgNation, as always, thank you so much for being a part of it. Make sure you tune in Saturday at 5:30 to watch me and Jeff on DawgNation Game Day. We'll have some really good coverage for you, and if not, we'll see you right back here next Wednesday at 7 o'clock for another episode of Before the Hedges.
Yeah.